Hey y'all, it's me, your host, Coach Pilar Arthur Sneed. Thanks so much for joining me here for another episode of The Last 10th. What a long year last week has been. I heard someone say this or post a meme about this on Facebook or Instagram or something like that. And I think that we can all agree that 2021 has also been, it's also been a ringer. What crazy times we're living in. So, two things. In addition to that, I often get questions about the title of this podcast. What does the last 10th represent? Well, the last 10th, and the part of the reason why I wanted to start this podcast was because I wanted to talk about the hardest parts or the most difficult and challenging parts of life. And I wanted to see where the places were that running and life intersect. So the last 10th represents that last 10th of the mile when things get really rough. You're almost there, but not quite. It seems like the last 10th is the farthest distance in any race that you need to complete. So that's what this podcast is really all about. And then today we are going to talk about something that I am passionate about, and that is mindfulness, meditation, and running. And again, talking about those intersections, the intersection of where those things meet. I'm excited to welcome Coach Eric Wilden to the show, a runner, meditation practitioner for well over 30 years. It's just a great conversation that we were able to have on the show today. I hope that this conversation sheds a little bit of light for you on the practice of Buddhism, the practice of meditation. And then I also hope that you're able to see where mindfulness and meditation can help you not only in your practice of running, but it can also help you in your daily life to be more compassionate, to be more action oriented, and even in these crazy times that we're living in, you can do some really good work. So let's get started. Hey y'all, it's me, your host, Coach Pilar Arthur Sneed. I am so excited to chat with y'all today. I know that this week has been, we are in the week of January 8th. We'll call it Insurrection Week, I guess. I know that this week has been a crazy week, and I always hope that these podcasts, these shows, are a moment where you can have a chance to laugh and listen and perhaps learn a little bit. So that is why we are here, despite all of the madness that is going on all around us. So I am super excited to be here today with Coach Eric Wilden. I know I say it every single week, but I have to tell you, I really am excited. Y'all may or may not know, but I am a Buddhist practitioner. I have been practicing Buddhism for, and I say I put practice in quotes because I don't consider myself to be a very good Dharma practitioner, but I've been practicing for about 10 years now. And of course, you know that I just found running about 5 years ago. So for me, running is like this joining of these two universes. And Coach Eric is another runner and another Buddhist practitioner and Dharma practitioner. So I have been really wanting to bring him onto the show so we could have a conversation of these two worlds that we are both super passionate about. And Coach, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much, Coach Pilar. I'm just as excited as you to be here and you gave me such a huge buildup that it's going to be really tough to live up to.
You can totally do it. You can totally do it. Yeah, we can do this
We
together.
got this. We got this. It's Friday. It's the end of Insurrection Week.
That's exactly right.
There's, we started off 2021 with a bang, and here
Literally.
we go. Yeah, things
Yeah,
can only get better from here.
that's
So
well, hopefully they can only go up from here. We
let's
can,
hope so. Starting right now.
that's right. Starting right.
We're looking at good stuff.
Yes, starting
It's
right
a lot
now.
of work,
So,
a lot of work to be done, but
uh,
we got this.
yeah, yeah, about 400 years worth.
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
Ah,
so where I usually like to start is I really, really love it when folks just tell me a little bit about themselves. So tell me a little bit about you.
so I'm a suburban dad. I live outside of Philadelphia with my wife and our two daughters who are 13 and 11, so that they keep us on our toes. Um, I've been I've been running for about 15 years now, and I've been a Dharma practitioner myself for, I like to say, 25 years, because it was about 25 years ago that I first visited a Zen center and learned to
Okay.
meditate. But, it's on and off. And like you,
Absolutely.
it's practice. I'm not always
Absolutely.
very happy with my practice, but we keep it going. I have a full-time job as a director of engagement for a nonprofit home care agency
Oh,
in
wow.
Philadelphia. So that keeps me busy throughout the week. And I've been doing that and working, I've worked in nonprofits for about 25 years now, but I've been doing that one for about 8 years.
Wow.
It's a great organization. It's called Ralston My Way, and we provide not just home care, but other in-home services like home repairs and yard
Mhm.
work and transportation for people 55 and older, with a focus on really helping people age in their homes and the community they want to live in, instead of being forced out and into facilities and that sort of thing. So that's what
That's
I do.
great.
Yeah, that's the full time job, and then of
Excellent.
course, my little side gig is Dharma Running, which is my where I'm focused on teaching meditation and teaching the Dharma really to runners, giving them tools to develop mindfulness and cultivate compassion and wisdom. And that's the thing I'm most passionate about in my life right now is just giving those offerings to folks as much as I can.
Wow. Awesome. So your plate is very full
You
on
could say that. Although I feel really, really lucky to be in the place that I am,
Absolutely.
doing the work that I do, both in my full-time job and with Dharma Running. It's like, if I could switch them and have Dharma Running be full-time,
Yes.
that'd be great. But I feel really, really lucky to be doing what I do. Lucky, especially right now,
Absolutely.
almost a year into the pandemic, to be able to work from home, to be able
Hmm.
to, to just have what I have. I feel very privileged, um,
Absolutely.
and I am very privileged.
Mhm.
So
I understand. I
yeah,
understand. So, um, two questions, I guess. So the first, I like thinking, which place should I start? So I, I know when folks who are in Buddhist communities, there's always, talk about how you came to Dharma practice. How did you find this Buddhist practice? And I guess I'll make it a twofold question. So the first would be for folks who are not familiar with Buddhism and Buddhist practice, meditation, mindfulness, it would be to kind of give a really quick synopsis of what that means. And then the second would be, how did you come to find this practice, which most people think is something that's like, Oh my gosh, it's so exotic. Wow, that's just so weird.
Right.
And like, oh, you always get when you say, "Oh, I practice Buddhism," people always go, "Namaste." You're like,
Right.
that's cute.
Or you see, no wonder you're so calm. No wonder you seem so happy. Mm, okay. At least I seem that way.
That's
That's great.
at least I seem like that. Those are the two, you know, really big questions.
So the synopsis of what Buddhism is that what you just asked?
Not really, not
Oh,
really. Not
yeah.
I think
No.
it's more like, you know, like a 10,000 foot sort of overview of I know it's really hard to
Right.
do, right? But like people hear that and a lot of things spring to their mind.
There's so much out there.
Mostly,
Yeah.
mostly, and I have a whole myself, I have a whole presentation on it. Mostly what I like I said, mostly what comes to people's mind is people with man buns, guys with man buns, white dudes with man buns, sitting on a cushion and
Oh
going,
my, you're
like I
describing me
said,
right now. Stop.
namaste. That's what people think. But there's
Yeah.
but there's a lot more to it than that. So
Right.
just like a
Right. It's
quick, you know,
so yeah, I mean, there are clearly, as you know, there are hundreds, if not more, schools of Buddhism that each take a kind of slightly different approach to this, but they all trace their roots back to the Buddha, who started with what we call the Four Noble Truths.
hmm
Life is suffering, which
hmm
people can be taken so many different ways.
hmm
I had a teacher recently explain it as well, the actual word dukkha is related to the wheel of a carriage,
hmm
and that the suffering they're talking about is when the center of the wheel is slightly off and it gives you a
mm
bumpy ride. That's the kind of suffering that the Buddha was talking about from my perspective, that
hmm
there's this underlying sense that things just are not perfect. And
Correct.
so we are always attempting to change them.
hmm
Um, whether it's by, acquiring something or getting rid of something or burying our heads in the sand.
hmm
We're always trying to make things right that way. So that's the first noble truth, the truth of suffering. The second one is that, the second one I just got into is that we're trying to change it.
hmm
We're trying to, the suffering is caused by attachment in some way. It's caused by the sense that we can get out of it. Um, and so there's a path. That's the third noble truth. And then the path is the sort of the way. I mean, it's the following the noble eightfold path, and we can get into all the different lists that Buddhists
Sure.
for,
We won't go,
here's
we won't go
here's
there.
80,000 different ways that you could do this or that. And then and that's when you start getting into the different schools of Buddhism,
Yeah.
whether it's Zen, which of course has multiple schools within it, or Tibetan Buddhism, which has
hmm
probably 85,000 schools within it.
hmm
There are many, many different paths to take. They all, in some way, involve practicing meditation.
Yes.
Most of them do. They have meditation and mindfulness as a foundation, but they also have two other legs, which one would be ethics. That's the foundation of a lot of Buddhism, and I think that's one of the things we miss out on these days when we're focused so much on mindfulness. Is we miss out on the basis of within Buddhism of Buddhist ethics,
So like
and then this
right conduct then.
conduct, right speech,
Mm,
um,
mm, mm,
compassion, sort of broader in a broader sense, just being kind.
mhm,
Um, and then the third leg would be wisdom, developing the right view, the mindset of looking at the world as interconnected, looking at what I think of as a self, as not just interconnected, but as an illusion. It's an illusion that I have a permanent, continuing self that doesn't change. So it's, there's a lot to all of this and a lot to
Absolutely.
unpack there.
Absolutely.
And,
Absolutely.
that's, I went to school for it, but
Yes.
spent a lot of money learning how to talk about it, but that's about as eloquent as I
No,
could get
that
right there.
that's
I think when you come right down to it.
that's
Um,
very good. That's very good. I think that gives people a good, you know, basis for understanding what that means because to say I rarely, if ever, talk to other people about the fact that other than other Buddhist practitioners or other Dharma practitioners about the fact that I am a practicing Buddhist, because there is so much misconception about what that means and how that plays out in the world, and because of what you said, that there's an almost a seeming infinite number of ways that you can practice, and to try to explain that to someone you,
yeah,
you know what I'm saying? It's like I can't really.
I, I, I do think that, even with all those fantasies that people have or the ideas they have about us out there, that, one thing is true, and that's that we're better than everyone else. Just kidding. Just kidding. Um, you can edit that out, right?
A lot of Dharma practitioners
You know,
actually think so. They
well,
think so.
there was a study recently. I just was reading about this the other day, and I meant to look up more of it in case I brought it up. But uh, there's an academic study out there looking at the practice of mindfulness, and that it rather than dispelling or kind of weakening the sense of self and selfishness, it's actually in some ways can strengthen it. And I think that a lot of that has to do with the way mindfulness is presented nowadays. I think that if you take mindfulness out of Buddhism without that right view, without that understanding of, or at least attempt to understand or sense that maybe things are interconnected, and that my self is not, a permanent fixed thing. I think that if you combine mindfulness with not the right view, that there's a tendency to have it solidify your place and your view rather than opening it, rather than opening you
Absolutely.
up. And so, and the mandala that you see in Tibetan Buddhism a lot is, it's a depiction of the world, and it can be in motion or it can be frozen depending on the way you're viewing things, right? Um, so openness to that right view, cultivating mindfulness within that, and practicing compassion and kindness toward other people help open that mandala and help make liberation possible for everyone, which for you and I, that's the ideal that we try to live with as Buddhists. Mahayana Buddhists folk look at the Bodhisattva ideal, which is the idea that, I'm going to forego liberation
Indeed.
until everybody else gets it, right?
Indeed.
So I'm not going to, I know enlightenment seems great, but I'm not going to go there until I help everyone else get there. And for me,
That's
that's
right.
that's not just the foundation for my Buddhist practice, but that's the foundation for doing social justice work and getting engaged in the world as an agent of change. It's like, because I can't be free until everyone else is. And the Buddha was saying that 2,500 years ago. We got to get on this.
That's
There's
right.
still
That's
time
right.
to make it happen.
That's right. I
um,
just made a post about that on Facebook. His Holiness the Dalai Lama said something about, he had a quote. I won't quote it exactly, but it was a quote about being in service to others, and that it's really great to talk about meditation, and really great to talk about mindfulness and all those things. But if you're not actually putting those practices into action by helping other people, then it's kind of just this esoteric, thing. It's really useless. It means nothing at the end of the day if you don't actually use your body in the service of other beings. So yeah, and then someone was like, "Oh, yeah, but then you could be acting like really, stupidly, and you could be not helping people because, and I'm like, yes, there's a danger of that, but that's not really what the teaching is about. The teaching is really about like this idea that we rest in meditation, right? We want, eventually we want to rest in meditation, but like we
Right,
just kind of rest here, like, oh, but I'm meditating, so I got
right,
it.
right.
I've got everything figured out because I've meditated.
Look, I'm blissed out now. So why do I have to care about anything else?
That's
That,
right.
I when I went to school in Naropa University for my master's degree, I started off in the engaged Buddhism program. It ended up they turned that into a Master of Divinity program. But I went there for the sole purpose of combining the activist work that I was doing at the time and the Dharma. And I spent my most of my time there trying to encourage people to get off the cushion,
Mm-hmm.
get out and
Mm-hmm.
do work in the world. The cushion is great. It's
Mm-hmm.
great because it can help us calm our minds. It can help us come from a place outside of the anger and frustration that we might be feeling with the world. And it helps us make better decisions about how to work for change. Um, so, so, but, you can't just stay there on the cushion and expect the world to change around you. You have to create the conditions for other people to become liberated too. I
That's
think,
right.
in fact, I wrote my master's thesis on this. So Gampopa was a thousand years ago the
Mm-hmm.
founder of the Kagyu school of Buddhism. I think that
Yes.
is that your is that your school? Are
Yes,
you
I
a
am.
Kagyu Buddhist?
I am a
Okay,
Kagyu Buddhist. I am. I
um,
follow His
that's
Holiness, the Jalwan Karmapa. He's my guy.
the Karmapa. Yes. So Gampopa was the founder of the school, and he wrote a book called, well, he probably didn't write it as a book, but anyway, it's
He
his
wrote it on
teaching.
those little papers.
Right. He has teachings that are known as the jewel ornament of liberation. And within those teachings, he talks about three types of generosity. And so
Mm,
this is actually what I went to for my thesis. And the three types of generosity, as he explains them, are material generosity. So giving people what they need, giving people a home, giving people, comfort, paying somebody's bills for them, or helping them pay their bills. Those material needs that people have. The second type of generosity is giving freedom from fear.
mm,
So creating a situation where people don't have to live in fear. So when we talk about um, just bringing this to modern day, if we look at something like defunding the police or police reform,
mhm,
so that black people and black men in particular do not have to live in fear of the police, then
mhm,
you're giving them freedom from fear. You're
mhm,
providing that. The third type of generosity is generosity of the Dharma. It's teaching people how to meditate, how to cultivate mindfulness, wisdom, compassion for their own individual liberation from this cycle that we're in of suffering, right? So my thesis was that we're not just looking at these three types of generosity as three types of that I can practice one or the other, it doesn't matter. My thesis was there's a hierarchy here. You got to start with the material generosity. You got to make life easier for everyone
mhm.
before they're going to be free from fear. And you have to do both of those things before you can start teaching people meditation and expecting that that's going to change their lives.
Right.
If you teach someone how to meditate, that's great. It can make their life better. If you teach them about if you offer the teachings of the Buddha to them, that can make their life better. But if they're going to go home and maybe they're in an abusive relationship, or maybe they're worried about paying their bills because they're living in poverty, um, liberation's that much harder for everyone when they're facing
Mhm,
those struggles. And until we do that for everybody, make sure that everybody has the material comforts that they need, without going too far, I guess, and make sure that everyone is free from fear. until we do that, that bodhisattva ideal to me doesn't mean anything.
Mhm.
It's we're not going to free everyone from the cycle of suffering and rebirth until we give them those things. That's been the foundation for for me of any social justice work that I've done over the last 20 years. I mean, I'm not out there on the front lines right now.
Sure.
But for me, that's the basis of all of it.
So, yeah, I don't think I had a question. I had more like a statement. Meh. I mean, I'm just like, yes. That's kind of like, it's like, oh gosh, I haven't had one of these kinds of conversations in a really long time. It's just so great.
I know it's gonna, and
Eh.
I'm afraid that I hope people are still watching and listening to this because, like, once I said Gampopa, they're probably
They're
like,
like,
"What? I don't
wait,
know what
what?
that.
I don't
What's
even,
that?"
what is a Gampopa? What is
I
that?
try not to, and I try not to use the Sanskrit and Tibetan words too
I
much.
know.
But
It's okay. It's
um,
okay. But hopefully they stuck with it through the end, through the three types of generosity, which I think that is such a huge and profound teaching. And I guess the place where um we can go awry, or I guess when I think of these three generosities in contrast to, say, Christian traditions, or probably more Christian traditions, right? Like, so like I hear teaching other people the Dharma. We could start going down the road of I can't even
yeah,
say the word. You know what I'm trying to say. Proselytize.
proselytizing.
I would say proselytization.
I
Proselyte.
used to live in Utah. It's proselytizing.
And as Dharma practitioners, that's not really like, it's not really our bent. Is not,
Right. Well,
bringing it.
yeah. I sometimes I tell people that I'm an evangelical Buddhist, um, because it's
You're
been
gonna
such a
take
big
this
part.
Dharma
It's
and
been
you're
such a
gonna
big part of
like
my
it.
life. But also, I've heard the Dalai Lama say when people have asked him, "Well, I was raised Christian. Are you telling me that if I turn to Buddhism, are you, hey, Dalai Lama, are you trying to convert me? What are you doing here?" And he
Right.
said, no, this isn't for everyone. If your tradition that you were brought up in can offer you peace and can teach you how to make a difference for other people,
Mhm.
can bring you to the same place that Buddhism has brought me, then
Mhm.
stay with that.
Then
Do
don't worry
that
about it.
because that works too.
That's right. Mhm.
There are many paths to the top of the mountain or
That's right.
to the base
That's
of the
right.
mountain.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
There are many
That's
ways to
right.
get there, and
That's right.
Buddhism is just one of them.
That's right. That's right. I
I just
appreciate
happen
that
to,
very much.
yeah, and it's worked for me. I got into it because I read Jack Kerouac in college,
Really?
and yeah, that's how I got into Buddhism. When I read Jack Kerouac now, I'm like, that's not really, I wouldn't put this out there as real Buddhism, but it got me into it.
So like, at what point was it when you said, because there is this point where you kind of go, oh, like this really makes sense to me, and it speaks to my heart, and it speaks to me
Yeah.
here. So where was that point where you said, okay, that's it. I'm all in.
Well, I think the first time I visited a Zen center,
Hmm.
I read Jack Kerouac, and then I was quickly on to reading books by Buddhist teachers about
Hmm.
Buddhism, and
Hmm.
not just beat writers, but they had a lot to say. Uh, but then the first time I meditated formally was with a teacher at the Kanzeon Zen Center in Salt Lake City.
Hmm.
Um, and we were sitting, and he said during the guided, it was kind of a guided meditation, kind of not, but he said, I want you to just ask yourself, who am I? It was kind of a koan. You know, those you know what a koan is, but
Hmm.
they're those weird questions like what is the sound of one hand clapping that are supposed to take you
That's right.
outside of
That's right.
your outside of the sort of structured way of thinking
That's
and
right.
change our perspective. And as soon as he said that, I had this vision of myself as like a well, you know, reaching down into an endless void full of wisdom. This is really sounds really hippy
No, it's
dippy.
okay. No, it's
This
okay.
this
I
is the
get it.
vision I had at the
It's
time.
okay. It's
Um,
okay.
that everyone else sitting in the meditation hall was the same, and so that was sort of my first glimpse into really believing that we're all the same,
Mm,
in some way. And so that was kind of that was when I started to get more serious about meditating, and I
mhm,
started to learn more. And then it wasn't for another couple of years until I had an experience, a really profound experience, of seeing others as myself and seeing what I was looking at as my enemy at the time. I was working for an environmental group, and so it was kind of the people working on the other side of an issue, but having this experience of literally looking at them and seeing them as no different from myself,
mm,
um, realizing that their worldview is no less valid than mine because it was the worldview that they had, and it was what
mhm,
it was the view that served as their reason for anything.
mhm,
And it just hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, okay, and I had actually I was working as an environmental activist and kind of really staunchly angry activist. And it's not that I don't think there's a place for righteous anger, but it doesn't always lead to skillful means
That's
in
right.
the work that we're doing. So I had this moment of I can't do that anymore.
Mhm,
I can't do the angry activist thing anymore,
mhm.
at least on this issue. And that really changed my life in a lot of ways. I went back and I started telling my friends who I worked with about it, and they were like, "What are you talking about?
They're just
Of
like,
course, they're different from us. Of course, they don't want the same thing we do." And yeah, they didn't want the same thing we did in terms of policies and things like that. But the specific incident I'm talking about was one where I recognized that we all have the same motivation, and that's to be happy. All of us have that
that's right.
motivation.
That's right.
We just have different ideas about what makes us happy, and
That's right.
sometimes those notions clash, and that's when we need to be able to come together and figure out solutions rather than shutting each other out of the conversation.
Mm. So, uh, given our current climate that we're in, where there is so much polarization, right? And also for me, being a brown person and often being the object of vitriol, literally, by other people, how do you envision that folks can move about in a world such as this, and also given this past week, right, where the
Yeah.
people who do have completely opposite ideals, even though, like, I'm with you, right? Because I find myself saying it to my husband too sometimes. I say, it's they can believe what they need to believe. It's just what they believe. It is what it is.
Yeah. I don't have an answer for you there. Look,
I got
I
nothing.
well, first of all, I'm a very privileged person, and I understand and appreciate that, and I know that I don't have that I don't face any of the same kinds of struggles as a lot of people. I also recognize that it's impossible to talk with some people. I'm not suggesting that we sit naively try to, create some kind of dialogue with the guy that was painted up in horns at the
Yeah,
podium
sure.
in the Capitol building. Like that guy is, we can't sit down with him.
Right.
Um, but we can start to, especially people of privilege like myself, can start to look at our own privilege. We can start to act as allies as much as possible. We can start to recognize that there are sacrifices that we may need to make in this struggle. And I think that's where a place where I come back to mindfulness sometimes is that
Mhm.
mindfulness is a tool that I can use when I'm thinking about what I'm going to have to let go of to make the world a more just place for everyone.
Mm,
I've started looking more into reading more about reparations and what it would really mean to
mm,
offer reparations to the descendants of slaves in this country
mm,
whose whose backs our entire economy was built on
mhm,
and whose suffering all of my privilege grows out of.
mhm,
What's it going to take to pay that back and get to a place of equality for everyone? That might mean that I got to let go of something in
mhm,
some way, whatever. I don't know what it is exactly, um, but I need to be open to that. And I think that's a place where, for me, mindfulness and being able to kind of rest in equanimity, and just observing, seeing what happens, listening,
mhm,
um, uh, trying to gain a better understanding of what folks need. It all comes back to that. And,
mhm.
you know, and I know right now everyone's like, I thought this was a running podcast,
No, that's
but
okay. It's okay. There have been many, many times where, we talk about we're here to talk about whatever. And
yeah, I know.
I just said, I just said in my intro in the last show that really it is a podcast about running, but it's just as much about the intersections of where our lives meet. Because just like people are anything, anything that they are, you're not just that one thing. So we're
Right,
runners, but we're people too, and we're
right.
Buddhists, and we're husbands, and we're wives, and we're this and we're that. So it's all about all of those different intersections, and you can't not talk about all of those things. And so
Yeah. And what I would say is what are you running for? I mean, if you're a runner, if you identify as a runner, that's great. And we do it for our health, we do it for our sanity. But what else are we doing it for?
Mhm,
Well, that health and sanity are privileges that we have because we have the luxury of running like we
mhm,
do.
mhm,
And what are we going to use that for? Um, when I'm not running, what am I going to do? When am I going to just close myself off
mhm,
and not pay attention to the insanity that's happening around me in the world? Or am I going to find a way to look at it and figure out what I can do? And that's another place mindfulness comes in is it helps us sit in the fire. It
yes.
helps us be in the midst of that insanity and craziness and anger and hatred and not let it drive us crazy and not let it get into our hearts in
Mhm.
the way that it can. This I have this painting back here that I
I
did in
love
grad
that.
school. That's my
Yes.
Buddha painting, and it's
Yes.
the Buddha sitting in the fire on a lotus.
Oh, I
Kind
love
of. I'm
that.
not a
I
very good
love that.
artist, but I
Better than
meditate.
I could do.
I meditate with that in front of me because to me, doing these practices and cultivating mindfulness is a way of allowing myself or challenging myself really to sit and listen and understand what's happening in the world and with all the craziness still then find the means to get off the cushion and do something about it,
Absolutely.
not hide from suffering.
Have you read Sakyong Mifam's book? It's I don't remember the exact title, but it's a book about meditation and running.
Oh yeah, Running with the Mind of Meditation.
That's it. That's the book. It's on my
So yeah,
bedside. It's on my bedside table.
it's a great
Um,
book. Sakya Mipam was the head of the Shambhala
yes.
lineage, which his father Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche founded.
Yes.
There's a lot of controversy around them.
Yes. There's always that's a podcast for another day
That's
because
another day.
the other thing is that Dharma and Buddhist practice. Now, let me rephrase that. The Dharma,
Mhm.
as the Dharma is free from controversy. Buddhist practitioners and Buddhist schools of thought are not.
Not at all. And I think that I think that I think one thing that's come out of the westernization of it is that there's been it's been easier to look at the leaders and say, you know, this guy's not perfect. I have some questions about this, or call them out when they actually are abusive,
Mm,
and breaking, you know, ethics or the law.
mm,
Uh, I think that's one of the good things actually about this sort of American Buddhism is that because of this American attitude of independence, which is artificial, really, but this kind of like self-reliant thing that we think we have, it gives us the guts to call someone out when they're doing wrong, even if they are the, you know, the top guy in the,
yes.
you know, and they can trace their wisdom all the way back to the I mean,
5,000
the
years.
perfect, right? Doesn't make them perfect. So,
There's
but oh
like,
yeah. So going back to Running with the Mind of Meditation, that is funny because that book I think came out when I was at Naropa or maybe shortly thereafter, and it excited me because it was around the same time that I'd started running. So you know, and in some ways, it probably encouraged me to run more and maybe to practice more too. It's a great book.
okay. It is a great book. So I was thinking as you were speaking about sort of like, somewhere in the beginning of the book, he talks about the fact that a lot of runners will say, running is my meditation. Myself,
Yeah.
person, and saying that this is sort of like, it's not such a, you can't really, again, going back to what we talked about before, which is that you can't really rest in running is your meditation. Um, but for myself, because running is so new, what I have found is that running has it's really helped to ground me more. It's
Hmm.
helped to do things for me that where sitting on the cushion has never done. Where like,
Yeah.
I could sit on the cushion for hours and I would never get the kind of peace of mind that I get that from going out and hitting the pavement. So I feel like there's like this contrast. And again, I'm not trying to, uh, go against this person with all this great wisdom. I'm not trying to do that. But at the same time, I'm like, I don't know. This is my experience. What can I say?
Right. You're absolutely right. I mean, I agree with you. I think running and meditation are different. But I think that I think runners in general, even if they don't know it, have a strong foundation in mindfulness.
Mm,
Because, I mean, even if you just think about the repetitive nature of your feet hitting the ground over and over again for whatever length of time, and you focus on that for a minute out of your run, that's mindfulness.
mhm,
That is developing the ability to focus on something without being distracted. I mean, if we as runners were distracted all the time, we wouldn't be able to run very far.
that's
So,
right. What's
um,
that?
so I always tell people when they come to my workshops or they're interested in hearing more about what sort of where I'm coming from with the Dharma running stuff that I'm doing is, you know, I think runners are ripe for learning meditation and practices to cultivate mindfulness, wisdom, and compassion
Mm,
because they have that foundation in following their breath or focusing on their form or focusing on their foot strike. I mean, it's all kind of built into running.
mhm,
And sure, I could put on put in earbuds and I could zone out and listen to music while I'm running, but I don't do that all the time.
Mhm.
And even, as someone who does that from time to time, I know that even while I'm listening to the music, I can come back in and focus on my breath. And
Yes.
I can start to learn how my mind works a little bit better, and I can start to see what are the things that are taking me away from the breath, what are the things that are taking me away from my form or my foot strike. And that's how I learn more about myself, and that's how I learn more about the filter that I see the world through, and that's how I learn how to acknowledge that filter and just better understand that my view isn't the way the world really is,
Hmm.
right? Um, Going off on a tangent there.
That's okay. That's
No,
okay.
but I
So,
mean, I, part of the reason I started Dharma Running in the first place was because I think runners have not more than anybody else, but I think with running, we have something that can give us a really strong foundation and a really strong basis for the rest of what I think Buddhism and mindfulness are about.
excellent. So, talk a little bit about Dharma Running and, some of the things that you're doing within your coaching practice.
So yeah, not much right now. uh,
I
it's been
understand.
before the pandemic. I mean, Dharma running is something that I've been doing for 5 years now or more. And before the pandemic, I was just getting into the swing of holding workshops and beginning to do some individual coaching. Um, my goal being, in a sense, and I say this partially tongue in cheek, but tricking runners into practicing meditation. Um, you
You're
know,
very tricksy, very
I
tricksy.
did. I don't want anyone to think that I'm promising that mindfulness will make you a better runner. It might. I think there are side benefits to it that can make you a
Sure.
better runner. But for me, that's not what I want. That's not my goal. And I hope when people are coming to my stuff that they're not just looking for that. My goal is to find people who are maybe starting off as running or even very experienced runners, and to say to them, you can use running not just to make yourself healthier, um, and not just to challenge yourself in the ways you might want to. You can use running not just because you want to win this race or do, or get a PR or whatever it might be, but you can use running to become a more mindful person, and based on that, you can then cultivate compassion. You can, if you so choose, you can work on your worldview too. You can work on understanding interdependence better. You can work on becoming kinder. You can work on becoming more loving.
Mhm.
Wouldn't it be great if we could do all those things with running as the foundation of it? You don't have to just sit on the cushion all the time to do that. Sitting on the cushion and learning actual meditation is great, but running can be part of that sort of regimen. And and then with all of that, what I'm also encouraging people to do, and I've been more vocal about this over the last year, is then go out and do something. Go
Mhm.
out and figure out the way you're going to make the world a better place. Um, because there are a lot of different ways that you can do that, but you got to be doing it to do it. You can't just expect it to happen.
Right.
So engage the world. With this mindfulness as a foundation, and like I was talking about, this sort of ability to sit in the fire,
Yeah.
let's figure out how to walk straight into that fire. And that's the only way we're going to learn how to make a genuine, authentic difference, is when we can be in the midst of all that and still be centered.
Right.
That's a lot. That's a lot to promise just from you got to start somewhere, right? I mean,
That's exactly right.
and everybody has different demons. I mean, I might want to walk into the fire so that I can fight structural racism and the caste system that we have in our country. I want to dismantle it. That's what I want to do. But then I have days where I just need to, like, the fire I'm sitting in is just getting out of bed in the morning. We all have a different place that we're coming from. But if we're mindful, if we're more mindful, we can figure out what that means for ourselves, and rather than just getting caught up in a sort of self-centered approach, we can take steps toward change, positive
Absolutely.
change.
Can you, because we have been talking so much about uh, mindfulness, can you, give in a nutshell? Because I always like to also ground people in that. What is mindfulness? What is mindfulness
Right.
practice? What is that?
In a nutshell, it's the ability to maintain focus on a chosen object. So if I'm mindful of my breath, it means that I'm paying attention to my breath in my body, the feeling of it. And
Hmm.
a lot of mindfulness has to do, we call it mindfulness, but a lot of it has to do with the body, has to
Hmm.
do with feeling our presence and feeling our feelings.
Hmm.
So I might be mindful of my breath. I might be mindful of, if I'm running, I might be mindful of my form, or I might be mindful of my cadence or my foot strike, but it's the ability to maintain that for extended periods of time.
Hmm.
So what we're doing in meditation a lot is we're sitting, we're focusing on the feeling of our breathing in our bodies, kind of coming into our bodies, and more and more, at least that's the goal, maintaining that focus without letting yourself be distracted.
Mm.
And so it's that when that, what they call the monkey mind, we're kind of able to have that take a back burner and
Brilliant.
sit with ourselves, and and it's not about holding it at bay. It's also about acknowledging it and seeing what that's all about too. Sometimes when you start to teach meditation to people and they say, I can't meditate because as soon as I sit down, my mind goes crazy. It's like, well, that's the whole point. Like, if you're
That's a,
noticing that your mind is crazy when you sit down to meditate, then you're
there
doing
you
it
go.
right. If you were to
That's
sit
right.
down and not notice that, then I don't know what I want, what you're having, because it's the
That's
same thing that
usually
happens to me every time I sit down.
that's what I tell people when I'm talking about meditation. I say that it's that the meditation is not the moment when you have no thoughts. That's not
Right.
it. Because you think you're not having thoughts. What's actually happening is that you're lost in thought. It's that
Yeah.
moment when you go, "Oh, I was just thinking." That's the meditation. Right there. You've just done it. That's the moment. And every time that you can do that, it's like, "Oh my goodness."
Yeah.
Yay.
Right.
Celebrate that you have had this moment of mindfulness.
And
Yeah.
the side benefit of that and of noticing it when it happens is that the more you do that, less it happens. At least, from my point of view and my understanding is that, the more we do that, the easier it then becomes to not be distracted. Um, so Yeah, I think a lot gets lost in translation. I think a lot was probably lost in translation when Buddhism came to America from the East. And,
Mhm.
when we put these perfect teachers on pedestals
Mm,
and listen to I love the Dalai Lama. He's
mm,
one of my favorite people in the whole world.
mm.
Um, he's
Me
got a
too.
ton of wisdom, and he has a really good way of transmitting his teachings to folks that's down to earth and isn't off base, I think. But he also has been meditating since birth, practically. I mean,
That's right.
this is his life. So
He has all the time to do it.
right, when he's talking about the way it works for him, he's not, and I think he would admit to this freely that that's not the way it works for somebody living in 21st century
That's
America
There you
who's
go.
just beginning to meditate.
That's
I
right.
I saw him speak one time, and he was taking questions from the audience that people had written down, and somebody asked him something like, "How should I raise my kids?" And he said, I'll never forget this. He said, I don't know. He said, I've been a monk my whole life. If I had kids, maybe I'd beat them. The Dalai Lama said that.
I just, I,
Um,
I literally just had a conversation that's very similar to this. It was about, I posted an article about Stacey Abrams, and it was, and the article was basically, saying that people are, sort of like now deifying her and saying, "Oh, Stacey Abrams has
yeah.
saved the world. She's a superhero. She's like God, and whatever." I mean, they're not really saying that. And one of my friends was just like, "Okay, well, I don't think that that's right. She really is really, really great." And I kind of explained the same thing that you said, which is basically like, it's not that we're not wanting to honor the fabulous work that she's done, but she's still human. And as you have said, she saw a job that needed to be done. She
Mhm.
saw that she needed to put herself into the world, and she went about the business of getting it done. That's
Yeah.
what she did. And His Holiness the Karmapa has said it. People will say, "Oh, people think I'm gonna like fly or I can read their minds." And he said, like, from my perspective, I'm just a guy. I'm a man. The only difference is that I have a lot of time to spend reading, educating myself, meditating, and practicing and doing all those things. So that's why I'm like here, and
Yeah.
and that's why I have some of these things. It's not because I'm like any different than you. I'm
Mhm.
still human.
Right. Right. They're in a place they have a privilege of being able to focus on that, and that's why they're teaching it
Yes.
because that's what they've been trained to do. That's sort of their calling. That's their
Yes.
place in the world. Yeah, yeah, that would be nice, wouldn't it?
I mean, many years ago when I first started practicing, I thought, "Oh gosh, I would really love, to go to the monastery and go to a 3-year retreat and do all the things." And I mean, I don't think that I wouldn't not like to do it, now, but like, time has passed, and so now I realize now that there is a high level of, it's similar to being a runner and making a commitment to run a marathon or run a 50 miler or whatever. There is a high level of commitment to that life. And I'm
Right.
like, do I have that level of commitment to that spiritual life? I probably don't.
Yep, I'm with you on that. It's hard enough to commit to a marathon training plan.
I probably do not have that. So kudos to
Yeah.
every person, at least not in this lifetime. So we'll try to work on that maybe, in another life. I've made the aspiration, but in this one, I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean that's the benefit of being a Buddhist is that we have got the next life too. Right?
That's right.
Um,
So, okay. So,
yeah.
Eric, listen, I want to ask you one last question.
Okay.
If you had advice that you have ever been given, or advice that you would like to give to runners, it can be running advice, it can be life advice, whatever that is, what would it be?
So, you know, there's this pizza place in my hometown, and this guy Pino that worked there. Every time he saw you, he'd say, "Take it easy, take it easy."
Yes.
That's actually my advice.
That's
Take it
great.
easy. Give yourself a break.
Mhm.
Um, you need to balance this, of course. I don't want to come across as saying self-care. It's all about self-care. But
That's
no,
right.
look. The world is a really, really challenging place. And a lot of us push ourselves too hard. Um, but if you know yourself and you know yourself well enough, you know when it's time to take it easy and when it's time to push harder. So
Mhm.
maybe I'd go back a step further and say, know yourself or
Mm.
get to know yourself, understand yourself. Sometimes I quote Dogen, who was the founder of the Soto school of Zen Buddhism,
Mhm.
said to study the self is to know the self, to know the self is to forget the self, to forget the self is to be enlightened by all things. So when we know ourselves, we're able to open to what the universe is telling us and what the universe needs from us in that moment. Um, so yeah, I'm backtracking. Take it easy. That's great, but know yourself first.
All right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. I love that. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you. That
I
was
have to
fun.
give you the classic. I have to do it. It has been an honest pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you. I
Thank you,
really
Pilar.
appreciate it.
That's
Thank you.
awesome.
I'd like to take a moment to thank Coach Eric for joining me on the show today. I really enjoyed our conversation. I especially enjoyed talking with you about mindfulness, running, and compassionate action. So thanks for joining me. For you, my dear listeners, I will put information about Coach Eric's running practice in the show notes. You will, in the very near future, be able to find him at dharma.run. I'll also put information about the organization that Coach Eric is an ambassador for, which is Still I Run. This organization helps runners who may be struggling with mental illness to cope and deal with that through the practice of running. For now, I am your host, Coach Pilar Arthur Sneed. Join me here again next week for another episode of The Last 10th.